What is up, everyone? Mark here, and welcome to episode 8 of the Prepared Pantry. It is the end of August, and depending on where you live, where you shop, or what coffee shop you go to, it is almost pumpkin spice season, or pumpkin spice season has already started. Today, I wanted to start things off by doing something a little more unusual. Believe it or not, we're going to do pumpkin spice lasagna. I know that sounds wackadoo, but really it is very good. So often what we come to associate with pumpkin spice is actually just that. It's the spices that go along with the pumpkin. It has nothing to do with the pumpkin flavor itself. Things like cinnamon, ginger, nutmeg, allspice. There's a little pinch of nutmeg in the recipe that we're going to make today, but other than that, the flavor of the pumpkin is really standing on its own. It's a delicious recipe. I hope you'll stick around and watch. Before we get started, I just want to thank you all again for continuing to support the channel. For watching today's video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not subscribed yet, please do. Click the red button down below or the watermark over in the corner. And when you do, make sure you hit the bell icon so you get a notification every time I have a new video out. Let's get started. Okay, so we are starting off with a pound of sweet Italian sausage. You can use either bulk sausage or, like I did, you can just remove sausage links from their casings, but a pound of sausage. We've got one small yellow onion. We have 4 ounces, or about a half of an American container, typically, of mushrooms. We have 2 cloves of garlic. We have a pinch of red pepper flakes. We have 3/4 of a cup of heavy cream. And one 15-ounce can of pumpkin puree. Organic pumpkin puree at that. It doesn't have to be organic. It does have to be just pumpkin puree, though. You don't want the stuff that's also got sugar and salt and spices and stuff mixed into it as a starter for pumpkin pie. You just want the pumpkin. Again, the flavor here predominantly should be the pumpkin, not the spices and things that go along with it. Again, we do have a little bit of nutmeg that goes in, but that's really it. I do imagine you could probably also swap out the pumpkin for, say, maybe summer squash, Mom, if you're watching. A little test to see if Mom's watching. Or maybe a pureed sweet potato. I bet there are other things that would work equally as well. So then that's for our meat sauce. Then we are going to need 1.25 cups of ricotta cheese. We've got 1/2 cup of finely grated Parmesan. We have 1/2 cup of chopped cooked spinach. The stuff that comes in the little frozen pouches and microwavable, perfectly fine for this. You just want to make sure that it is cooked and that you've squeezed as much of the water out of it as possible before you measure it. Otherwise, you're going to have 1/2 cup of not just spinach, but also water, and it won't be enough spinach. And you'll also have extra water to drive off in the cooking process. We've got 1 egg. We've got 1 tablespoon of chopped fresh sage. We have 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder and a pinch of nutmeg. There's that nutmeg. And then once we put everything together, we're going to need 2 cups of shredded mozzarella cheese. Do shred your own cheese. Don't use the pre-shredded stuff. It's going to have anti-caking stuff on it, and that's not good for meltiness and whatnot. Just buy it bulk and shred it yourself if you can. That's 2 cups shredded, which is about, I think, about 8 ounces by weight of cheese. And we've got 1/4 cup of more finely grated Parmesan. And that's about all we need. So I'm going to put a few of these extra ingredients away, and when we come back, we'll finish prepping the last of our ingredients and get started on our sauce. Okay, so the last couple of things we need to do here are prep our onions and our mushrooms. Also, I did forget to mention a minute ago that we do also have some light olive oil here for the cooking, salt and pepper for seasoning, and a little bit of white wine for deglazing the pan. If you don't have white wine or don't have wine, don't want to use wine, you can use broth, water, totally up to you. So let's get our onion cut here. Now, easiest way to cut an onion, particularly for the way that we're going to use it here, is to cut it pole to pole from the root end down. You've got 2 halves. And cut off the little bit of the stem. Leave the root intact. And we're going to cut into it at kind of an angle, just like we're trying to make segments. Straight down at the top, going back to an angle at the sides. And we're not going all the way through. We're just going close to the end, but not all the way there. Now, cut in even increments. And this will be perfect. And a little of this is good. We can still cut this off at the end. And we're just going to repeat the same thing with the other half. All right, so the mushrooms, I am firmly in the camp of do not wash your mushrooms. These are just wiped off with damp paper towel to get any loose dirt. If you run these under water, they're like a sponge. They're just going to sop up a ton of extra water. You're going to have to drive all that water off in the cooking process, and it's going to take longer to cook the mushrooms because of that, and they won't brown. So just wipe them off, and we're going to just chop these into small pieces. All right, I'm going to clean up a few scraps and then we're going to get started on our sauce. Okay, so we're going to add a little bit of oil to our pan and get this going over medium-high heat. And we're going to add our sausage. Breaking it up in the beginning. Okay, I'm going to season this with a little bit of salt and pepper. And we're just going to continue to cook this until it's browned and cooked through for several minutes. And continue to break it apart as it cooks. Of course, lasagna is another ingredient you're going to need for this, which I failed to mention in the beginning. I cooked my lasagna ahead of time. You're going to need about 8 ounces, about half a 1 pound box, at least in the US. You can cook them up to a day ahead if it's a good quality pasta. They are just boiled for half the time that is normally called for. So usually they would go 7 or 8 minutes. I only had them in boiling water for about 4 minutes. So they're like super al dente, which is what we want for our finished product. They will continue to cook a little bit in the liquid of the sauce and the stuff that's around them. I'm going to be using whole wheat pasta in mine today, whole wheat lasagna noodle. You can use whatever lasagna noodle you like. I just encourage you to use a better quality lasagna noodle if you can. And this looks like we're almost where I think we need to be. Okay, I am going to go drain the excess grease and put the cooked sausage aside. Okay, so I've not wiped out the pan, but I've drained the excess grease and we have our sausage sitting aside. I'm going to heat a little bit more olive oil in here now. And we are going to start the onions. And we just want to cook these until they start to become translucent. And once this gets hot and sizzling, I'm going to deglaze it with a couple tablespoons, give or take, of the wine. Again, you can use water, you can use broth, totally up to you. Season with a little salt and pepper. Too much pepper at this point is just going to burn. So these are starting to become translucent. I'm going to hit these with a little bit of wine. This might splatter a little bit. More than a couple tablespoons. Just going to use that to kind of dissolve some of the brown bits that are still on the bottom of the pan. Get all that flavor to stick to the onions instead. And once most of the wine has evaporated, I will be adding the mushrooms. So now I just want to continue to cook this for several minutes until the mushrooms are starting to brown and really break down. And you can see the mushrooms are already starting to reduce. If at any point the pan gets a little too dry, you can always add a little bit more water, broth, or wine. Alright, these mushrooms are looking just about where I want them to be. I'm going to go ahead and add the red pepper flakes and the garlic. And we're just going to cook this for another minute or so until everything is fragrant and well cooked down. Okay, now we're going to add the sausage back in. I'll lower the heat just a bit. And we're going to add the cream. Finally, the pumpkin puree. And I'm just going to mix this over low heat until everything is pretty well combined and fairly homogeneous. I mean, as good as you can get. Well, this looks pretty good at this point. If you want, you could taste it, maybe season it with a little salt and pepper. I don't like to go too overboard with the salt and pepper because it can always be customized on the plate. For sure, everything definitely needs a little bit of salt and a little bit of seasoning, but just don't want to go overboard. All right, so we're going to get this put into a bowl and set aside. Okay, with our pumpkin sausage mixture ready, we can move on to our cheese mixture. So we're going to first crack and break up our egg, just to make sure that that kind of gets well distributed throughout. We're going to add our sage, garlic powder, nutmeg, spinach, Parmesan, and ricotta. And we are just going to get this mixed as well and homogeneous as we can get it. Okay, I'm going to give this just a little bit of salt and pepper. Okay, I think we look pretty good now. All right, Next step is to get this together into the casserole. All right, we're ready to assemble. So we've got our sauce, we've got our mozzarella, we've got our ricotta mixture, and we've got our cooked lasagna noodles. Now, like I said, I used whole wheat lasagna here, and I cooked it for about half the time it would normally be cooked, so it's still quite al dente. Toss in a little bit of oil just to keep it from sticking together. Now, I've figured out that for an 8x8 dish, I need about 2/3 of these lasagna noodles. So what I'm going to do is for each layer, I'm going to cut off 1/3, and then I'm going to use those 2/3 to make the third strip, because this should fit 3 across. So the first thing we're going to do is put in a nice layer of our sauce at the bottom, just to get things coated. You can refrigerate this if you need for a day or so before you cook it. You can also freeze it. Just give it 24 hours to thaw before you do try to bake it. Okay, so let's cut 1/3 off of each of our noodles. And all I'm doing for this is I just took a piece of parchment paper and marked it on the back side with marker, just because I don't want the marker touching the food, but you can see through the paper perfectly. So we're going to get one piece here. And do that to one more. And I'm going to put these pieces on the edge and put the cut pieces in the middle. And I'm just going to alternate, vertically and horizontally as I build this, and just stagger where I put that cut piece so that it's not falling in the same place. So for our first real layer, we're going to do more sauce. And as we get this started, I have the oven preheating to 400 degrees to bake this off. And whenever I'm doing a recipe like this, I do like to make an extra couple of lasagna noodles just in case, because you never know if something's going to break and fall apart, or really what could happen. Okay, next up is the ricotta mixture. I want to give this a good sprinkling of mozzarella. And a layer of lasagna. Okay, let's top this with the rest of our mozzarella. And our Parmesan. All right, now this is going to go into a 400-degree oven, uncovered, for about 15 to 25 minutes until it's heated through and bubbling and nice and brown on the top, and the cheese is nice and melty. All right, this is hot out of the oven, and I do mean hot. Still bubbling away. So this is going to need to sit for about 10-15 minutes, and then we'll be able to dig in. Okay, we've let this cool for about 15 minutes, and we are ready to cut into it and see what we've got. I will be enjoying my lasagna tonight with a lovely Angry Orchard rosé. Figured the cider would kind of go with the theme. Let's see. Doesn't look bad. Still very hot. That is really good. It's a good amount of pumpkin flavor, but it's not sweet. A little bit of sweetness, though, from the sausage. Remember, this is just pumpkin. We did not add any sugar, no extra sweeteners here. This is really good. So, tell me down in the comments, is this something that you'd consider making? You know, after seeing it here today? What do you think? Are there any other recipes you'd like to see this coming fall that are, you know, pumpkin recipes? Put that in the comments too. That's it for this one, guys. We'll see you next time.